Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits using technology. Joining me today is a real big superhero, actually. It's Watt Hamlett. Watt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex. Great to be here. And by real big, you mean because I'm 6'4"?
Yes. No, you're a big person in the nonprofit space, especially like the Salesforce nonprofit space. I think your name is definitely, I believe it is, more popular or very popular. Let's go with that one.
Oh, well, thank you. That's nice to hear.
You're welcome. And I was honored to meet you at the World Tour in New York this past year. So that was a pleasure as well. And yes, you are quite tall. So it's hard to miss you, even in the sea of, 15,000, 30,000 people that were there. So
that's right. It's me and Cody the bear.
Well, listen, for anyone who hasn't heard of you before or doesn't know you much, could you give you a brief introduction of who you are and what you do, also known as your superhero origin story?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I truly have been listening, I think, since from the very beginning. And you've interviewed a number of folks that I have known for a while. So it was really exciting to get to hear the kind of conversation you had with them. And then I feel like I've gotten to know so many more interesting people through these conversations. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Let's see. I'm from the town of Farmville, which is a small town in Virginia. So just like Superman was from Smallville, I'm also from a tiny town. Not comparing myself to Superman, just making that analogy. So I started my career in nonprofits, fairly early on. I had the privilege of working for an organization called NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, based out of Arlington, Virginia. And I worked with them for 5 years as what today we would call their digital director. At the time, it was director of web services. But I came in there in 2002, just as they were about to launch their first data-driven website. So up until that time, they had a static HTML brochureware type website, and they were in the process of implementing a platform that was going to give them the ability to, within one system, have a CMS for content management, an email marketing tool, online fundraising tool, online advocacy tool. It integrated with their membership system and with their donor database. And so I really got to jump in and get a good understanding of the types of technology needs nonprofits have, as well as the inner workings of a large organization. They were actually an affiliated organization. They had 1,000 affiliates across the US. So part of the challenge was trying to enable all of these small local organizations with a tool set at the same time. So that was a fantastic experience and a great organization. And I left there to go to work for a nonprofit technology company called Convio. They were eventually acquired by a larger tech company in the space called Blackbaud. But for about 5 years, I was a solution engineer for Convio. And so that meant I got to go and meet with literally hundreds of nonprofit organizations over my time there to help them evaluate and understand how the Convio toolset could be a good fit for their nonprofit organization. And so I loved that job because it gave me the opportunity to just meet and interact with so many organizations, so many different types of organizations. And then one of the things that happened in my time at Convio was they introduced what was the first donor database app built for Salesforce. So I was relatively new to Salesforce at this time and had never seen it used in a nonprofit context. And so, very quickly got to learn about how the Salesforce platform could become a donor or data management platform in a nonprofit context. From there, I went to work for a Salesforce consulting firm where I was a solution architect for about 5 or 6 years, again, getting to work with several hundred nonprofits at the point of their technology evaluation and partner selection process, and get to see all of the ways that Salesforce could be applied to nonprofit needs, as well as be part of this tremendous period of growth of Salesforce in the nonprofit sector. So I left there in 2018 and started my own firm, Watt Hamlett Consulting. So I'm a company of one. And my focus is on helping nonprofits make plans and decisions related to Salesforce. So I no longer do any of the hands-on technical work myself, but instead kind of work upstream of implementations and partner selections to help nonprofits evaluate whether Salesforce is the right fit for their organization and then how they can be most successful in adopting it for their needs.
Yeah, you and I have a lot of overlap. Well, not a lot, but at least a noticeable overlap in our skill set. But generally, when I get involved, they've already made the decision that Salesforce is the right tool. So you actually help them make that determination. But do you consider other CRMs as well, or is it whether Salesforce itself is the right fit or not?
Generally, when I'm working with organizations, they have gotten to the point of deciding that they want to go down the Salesforce path. If they truly wanted a vendor agnostic technology selection process, I would refer them to someone else to do that. So I'm typically working with organizations who pretty sure they want to go with Salesforce, but want some validation of that decision, and then also some help in understanding what it's likely going to take, both from an internal process and resourcing perspective, as well as what kinds of external partners or consultants they should work with, and kind of getting a handle on what the cost and timeline might look like so they can be sure that they're ready. I also do work with organizations who are already on Salesforce and are either having some challenges with it and are trying to understand the nature of what's going on to know, is it something about the way the system is configured that's not working for them? Are they maybe not staffed correctly around Salesforce? Or it could be nonprofits who are using Salesforce and it's going great, and they are just trying to make a plan or a roadmap for the things they want to do going forward on the platform. And so again, I can kind of come in and help them work on making some decisions and creating a plan for where to take the technology next inside their organization.
Yeah, that all sounds quite familiar. I do something very similar, but I do get my hands dirty from time to time.
Yeah, I think there's a tremendous need for that kind of service for nonprofits. I think the fact that there aren't a lot of folks like you and like me who are out there doing it keeps it under the radar. And I think it's not something organizations are used to buying or used to having consulting help to do. But hopefully through conversations like this, more nonprofits will become aware of, the value of essentially having a consultant who can help them work with their consultants to drive their technology goals.
Yeah, totally agree. In helping them figure out, so in that pre-phase, before they've actually made the purchase for Salesforce, would you akin that to like a discovery call where you're making sure that Salesforce is the right choice? And if it is, here are the steps you need to take to be successful based on what they're trying to achieve. That's, a typical discovery type call, right?
Yeah. So I think that work kind of ahead of the purchase decisions, very much is a discovery or requirements gathering process. And, oftentimes I can meet with an organization and in a matter of 30 minutes or an hour, we can really drive towards some clarity. Typically, though, in the projects that I'm doing for nonprofits, they want to dive a little bit deeper and do some more intentional discovery or diligence around painting a more complete picture of the organization. So involving more stakeholders, doing more evaluations of their current tech systems to try to get clarity for what would be a good candidate for replacing with something that's Salesforce or Salesforce ecosystem based versus, maybe just keeping what they have because it's working well enough. So those kinds of assessment engagements, can last anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And the output of that again would be, greater clarity for the organization of where it is today with its current technology, what a move to technology would mean, both from a move to Salesforce would mean both from a technology or solution perspective, as well as thinking about the cost, the timeline, the kinds of resources they would need. And then any other considerations. Often what I'm looking for are things that I think would either potentially enhance their ability to move to Salesforce or detract from their ability to move to Salesforce. So like, I'm going to want to understand, do you already have folks on your staff who are acquainted with Salesforce? Given how long it's been around in the nonprofit sector, it's not unusual at all that new staff have come into an organization who bring with them Salesforce skills and who can be champions within the organization. So that's, an asset that I try to look for. And then also thinking about liabilities. Sometimes organizations are making these technology decisions when they are up against some kind of deadline, like a new initiative that's going to launch, or some other significant aspect in the life of the organization. And so I can help them recognize, the journey you're about to go on with Salesforce is going to be very time and resource intensive. So do you feel confident that you can make the resource allocations that are necessary now, given the other things happening in the life of the organization, to, for this to be something that you are successful at, and that it doesn't, you don't collapse under the weight of, because there's just too much going on for your staff to be able to manage it effectively.
Mm. And these are all the most important questions to ask during or the beginning of a project, because once they've been settled, I mean, the implementation of it, the delivery of it should be pretty straightforward. At least risk should be significantly reduced, because all the major questions have already been answered, and now it's a matter of just executing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, at my best, the work that I'm doing is both in service of the interest of the nonprofit, and then also in service of the interest of whatever consulting firm they end up working with to take them through the technology change. Because I've seen now this process up close as organizations go through implementations. And one of the kind of primary ways that consulting partners come into these projects is they will have identified a certain scope and a certain timeline and a certain budget. And so they're going to want to be able to manage very closely to that, both for the sake of the nonprofit to be able to, stay within the nonprofit's constraints, but also for just managing the work of their own consulting teams. And so my feeling is the better prepared the nonprofit can be at the point that they arrive at starting a technology project, the better it's going to be for the nonprofit and for their partner as well, to keep things, running smoothly and on track.
You're tempting me to ask a whole bunch of questions to that effect, actually, like what a nonprofit can do to better prepare themselves for something like this. And maybe we'll jump into that a little bit before we get to the other topic I had in mind. So let's answer that question first then. Like, what can a nonprofit do? Maybe high level, 2, 3, 4 bullet points that you can think of that a nonprofit can do to prepare themselves for such a project moving to Salesforce, to put all the chips in their favor, so to speak.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I created a resource. It's called the Nonprofit Guide to Nonprofit Guide to Choosing a Salesforce Consulting Partner. And that's available on my website, watthamlettconsulting.com. It's a free resource. And I essentially lay out the full process that I go through when I work with organizations. But again, it's designed to be self-serve. So nonprofits could also kind of take it and run with it if they wanted to do this on their own. And so the place that I start in that, Alexander, and I think this is, no surprise, is helping the nonprofit get very, very clear about their needs. One of the things that I found is when an organization puts themselves into a buying position, at that point, it's no one's job to tell them no. So whether they're going to talk to a technology vendor or a consulting partner, any external entity is going to be looking for ways to say yes to that. And so before nonprofits go out and start having those conversations, they need to understand with such clarity what it is they need. So what are their technology related goals? How do they prioritize those goals, recognizing that they may not be able to get everything they want? So what's going to be most important? And how will they measure success? How will they know if they have succeeded on the other side of their technology change? And so those are the things they have to be armed with. So as they're having conversations about features and functions of Salesforce, or license types, or specifically what products, apps, customizations will be implemented in their org, all of that has to be driven by that clear understanding of their needs. It's very important that there's organizational leadership involved. And I always, require my clients to have an executive sponsor who is responsible for the change within the organization and who is helping to set and maintain the vision, because these processes are long, they are expensive, and without someone at the top to both keep folks motivated as well as to have the backs of the project team, of the staff who are going to be affected by the change, to make sure they're getting what they need, to make sure if there are blockers or things that need to be taken off their plate so they can see the project through successfully, that's something that only can happen at a leadership level. So I think, between getting clarity on the needs, which is often more of a grassroots type activity, going out to talk to all the different stakeholders and understanding, where they are with their current technology and what would make their lives better, and then pairing that with appropriate executive leadership and vision. I think those are two key ingredients that I'm always looking for to feel good that organizations are going to have a good chance of getting a return on their investment in Salesforce.
And once you've finished your part, the discovery call or the discovery session or workshops and whatnot, and you make all these decisions and you've set all these pieces in motion, you said you don't quite do the implementation itself, that usually is handed off to another team. How does that transition work? And who do you recommend partners to work with, or do you have a list to work with?
Ooh, I feel the transition coming. Yes. So a big part of my work and the value that I bring is helping nonprofits to find the right technical resources to do their Salesforce work. And so quite often that is a formal process that I will take them through. So once the needs assessment is complete, there's clarity around moving forward with Salesforce, and that this is the right time to do so, and that the organization is prepared to commit the resources. Then I will help them find, I will conduct a partner selection process to help them find the right technical resources. And, again, most of my projects are for new implementations. So these are large, long, complicated projects that require full implementation teams. So I'm typically working with consulting firms. Although often if the scope is smaller, often organizations could work simply with an independent consultant that would be able to sufficiently meet their needs. But for that kind of partner selection process, and again, this is outlined in that guide that I mentioned, I will help the organization put together an RFI, so request for information, and then that will essentially be an articulation of all of the needs and goals that we uncovered through the assessment, gives them a formal way to communicate that out. I will do research on their behalf to identify the firms that I think are going to be the best fit for their needs. And then we will engage in some kind of iterative conversations to try to arrive at the firm that we think is going to be the best fit. So I think where you were going with the question was that, so it's very important to me to have a good understanding of the sort of the breadth of options that are available to nonprofits who need Salesforce consulting help. And when I started, not Watt Hamlett Consulting, but even further back when I started with Convio in 2008 and starting to work in the Salesforce ecosystem, there were about 15 total companies that focused on Salesforce services for nonprofits. And so it was possible at that point to keep track of all of those firms in your head. You sort of knew, who they were, how big they were, what kind of work they like to do. But as time has gone by, the ecosystem of consulting partners has just grown larger and larger. So in 2015, Salesforce.org, in an effort to kind of provide some more structure for their own, nonprofit and higher education consulting partners, launched an official partner network. And at that point in time, there were 34 companies that aligned themselves to Salesforce.org. So that's 2015. If you go then 3 years later in 2018, that number had doubled to 78. And that's the same year that I started Watt Hamlett Consulting. And so I realized if I was going to be able to effectively advise nonprofits about their partner options, I can't rely on just trying to keep all of this straight in my head anymore, that I was going to need a more systematic way to understand each of these firms and when they might be the right fit for a particular nonprofit. So that the year that I launched Watt Hamlett Consulting, I started to conduct my own independent research into this partner network that Salesforce.org had created. So each year in June, I would go out and gather publicly available data about those partner network companies. And that was primarily through the App Exchange, although I would also use other sources like LinkedIn, and was just amassing this large data set year over year that helped me understand who the firms were, what particular qualifications they had in terms of certifications or prior project work. And as time went by, that network just kept getting bigger and bigger. So at the end of last year, there were almost 130 firms now as part of the Salesforce Partner Network. But what happened earlier this year is that Salesforce.org decided to end that partner network. So they took down the pages on their website that used to provide a list of all of these 130-ish firms, and instead linked over to the general area of the App Exchange that is the Salesforce Consultant Directory. So now, instead of having a curated group of 130 companies who do Salesforce for nonprofits, now they were simply saying, nonprofits, go to the App Exchange. Here's 2,500 firms. You will have to sort out who is going to be the best fit for you. So when that happened back in February of 2023, I recognized that this was now going to pose a challenge to me, for one, because now I've lost a source by which I can understand who these companies are that want to serve the sector, but also obviously was going to make it challenging for nonprofits to sort through and find those best fit consultants, and also make it more challenging for the consultants themselves to be found by the nonprofit clients that they wanted to serve. And I did a webinar earlier this year where I just kind of laid all of this out, and I did a demo of the App Exchange to try to show how nonprofits could use the tools that are available there to help them find the partners that are qualified when it comes to doing work for nonprofits. But I also just got to thinking more about the gap that existed and what could be how the App Exchange could be improved upon to provide maybe some more useful information or more relevant information to nonprofits. And so out of that kind of thinking came this idea for a new site that I launched earlier this month called Watt's List.
So started with, I'm just keeping track of the numbers, 15 to 34, 78, 130, then now amassed and shuffled into a huge list. Yeah, it makes total sense nonprofits already need as much help as possible. I think it's one thing I love about working with nonprofits is that they cherish the extra mile that you go for them. So providing a more curated list, something that's more tailored to what they need, they will find very useful and they'll be very grateful for it. And yet trying to fish through 2,500 firms just for the ones that do nonprofits and then trying to figure out how to measure them. I mean, I can't imagine them doing that. So it started Watt's List this year. I know I'm on it as well. I'm curious to know how many, because you said there's not just firms, but also independent consultants. How many people have you currently on it, and what kind of growth have you seen since the beginning? Like, what has a general market reception for creating this list been like?
So I really have had no idea what to expect. I had some hunches that this would be a welcome opportunity for consultants, because it was now going to provide essentially a single place that any nonprofit looking for Salesforce consulting help could go and find them. And I assumed it would be a welcome resource for nonprofit organizations as well. And so far, that seems to be true. So the site launched just maybe 3 weeks ago, so June 5th, 2023. And as I was planning out the site, I thought, if I could get 50 consultants in this directory by the time it launches, to me, that feels like a good critical mass such that organizations could find some breadth of available options. And so I was pleasantly surprised that by the time June 5th arrived, there were over 120 consultants that had created listings. So that was nearly 100 firms, and then 25 or so independent consultants. And if you add up, so part of the listing for a consultant is how many people in that company provide Salesforce consulting to nonprofits. So recognizing that some firms only serve nonprofits, so 100% of their team is nonprofit dedicated, while others, have other practices, so nonprofits just a part. But based on that question, how many consultants do you have in your company that provide Salesforce services to nonprofits? If you add it up across those, 120 plus listings, it's over 2,000 individuals. And so to me, that feels like a really good, a really good amount. There's a lot of now choice that's available that nonprofits can discover from within Watt's list. And I think, you touched on one of the things that was important to me in creating this resource is that, I think the App Exchange is great. I think it's gotten even more useful now that they've introduced the Find a Partner site. So if folks haven't seen that yet, I really encourage them to check that out on the App Exchange. It provides a better user experience for drilling in and finding consultants based on certain criteria. But what you won't find on the App Exchange are independent consultants, folks like me. And so it was important to me that in the directory that I wanted to create, that it would represent both traditional consulting firms as well as independent consultants, because really up till now, I was not able to find a place where one could go and find independent consultants. And in fact, a lot of people at my network were coming to me over time saying, "Hey, I'm looking for someone who can help out with, this particular aspect of my Salesforce needs." And so I went out and tried to find those folks myself just through my own network. And so I like this now that there's a more scalable way to do that. People don't have to know me in order to get recommendations for consultants. And again, I think it helps things be more efficient for consultants, because nonprofits, through the tools on Watt's list, nonprofits can kind of self-select into the types of services they're looking for, and then kind of narrow in which consultants will be the best fit for whatever those needs happen to be.
Yeah, if you could talk more about how they can find people and firms on the list, because right now the list is pretty flat, right? There's no sponsored list. I can't pay or an additional amount to be promoted based on certain conditions. So what are the levers that a nonprofit can use to find the right resource using your list?
Yeah, so let me just talk a little bit about the process. So if you're a nonprofit looking for some kind of Salesforce consulting resource, you can go to wattslist.info. You'll have to request an access code. So there's a form you fill out. You'll be emailed an access code. You'll enter that on the homepage, and then that will give you free, unlimited access forever to Watt's list. So once you're on the site, you can see the full list. So from the homepage, you can page through all 120 plus listings. But most critically, there are a set of filters that the site provides so that you can, again, drill into the firms that provide the things that you're looking for. And as of now, there are 15 different filters that can be applied. So, I wanted there to be a lot of utility in this for folks to be able to really drill in. So this is everything from, are you looking for a consulting firm? Are you looking for a consulting firm or an independent consultant? Are you looking for consultants in a certain region of the world? So there are, I think now, consultants based in the U.S. and 6 other countries currently on Watt's list. And among those firms, they essentially provide services around the globe in 11 different languages. So being able to find the right partner from a geographic or a language perspective. And then there's a set of filters related to technology. So what are the specific Salesforce technologies that you need services around? And that's divided into both nonprofit specific technologies. So I think there are actually 12 different Salesforce owned nonprofit solutions that are available in the marketplace. And this is everything from NPSP to outbound funds module to accounting subledger, to the new nonprofit cloud solutions, right? So being able to select your Salesforce specific nonprofit solutions, what other Salesforce solutions you may need. So beyond the nonprofit sector, things like Service Cloud or CRM Analytics or Heroku. So helping nonprofits identify partners based on the specific technologies they need services for, and then helping them identify partners based upon the types of services that they need. So in some cases, nonprofits will need people or partners who can do implementation. Sometimes they just need support for an existing implementation. Sometimes they just need help with technical architecture or solution design. So they can select from among those kind of more technical services. And then there are all kinds of other services that these firms provide that nonprofits may also want to take advantage of. So things like help with data governance, change management, product development, staffing strategy, user experience design. So I think, at a high level, one of the things that Watt's List doing this has made clear to me, and I hope makes clear to nonprofits, is the breadth and depth of what a consultant can do for an organization is quite significant. And I think that's great news for nonprofits, because it means that whatever their technology needs may be, wherever they are in their journey with Salesforce, there's likely someone who is there ready to serve them. The flip side of that, of course, is that there are so many firms now that the process of choosing among them can be time consuming, and so I think Watt's List can help in kind of narrowing it down from 120 to maybe 5 or 10. But even from there's additional legwork that nonprofits will need to do to validate if a particular firm is a good fit for them. So from Watt's List, from the profile of the firms on Watt's List, nonprofits are able to do things like link over to their AppExchange listing, link over to their website, and then crucially contact firms directly. So there's a contact us button for every firm that's listed. So nonprofits can reach out directly to establish a relationship, to ask questions, and to help them further refine who they think would be the best fit for their nonprofit needs.
That was you're a mind reader, actually, because that was my next question as you were speaking. Is once a nonprofit, let's say they go into the list independently, not through your guidance, and they find maybe a short list of organizations and firms to work with, and it's maybe to your number 5 to 10. At that point, is there any other hand-holding, or is there like an extra service that you can provide, or any other guidance that you can provide, or recommendations to know, okay, how do I get those at 5 to 10 to maybe 2 or 3 to do a real deep dive and then do the RFI or RFP process with?
Yeah. So I think, first and foremost is I would encourage organizations to make use of the filters to really hone in on the consultants that will be the best fit and meet the most criteria for them. The filters are pretty powerful, but it does take a little bit of finessing to make sure you're using them to their full extent. And so one of the things that I'm going to be doing, I haven't done yet, but I'm going to be doing a demo of Watt's List where I can hopefully give folks some tips on how to use the site well. So that's one tip. And then especially when it comes to consulting partners, the majority of the firms that are on Watt's List are also Salesforce partners. So they also have AppExchange listings. And so I really encourage organizations to kind of use Watt's List side by side with the AppExchange, because the AppExchange is going to fill in some blanks that Watt's List doesn't, in terms of the specific certifications that an organization may hold, the number of projects that they may have completed as a company, and then specifically something on the AppExchange called Navigator that looks at a given firm's expertise in specific functional areas. So in the nonprofit sector, that would be fundraising, engagement, program management, and grant making. So you can see which firms have been validated by Salesforce who have done projects in those areas. And then you can also see customer reviews as part of a company's App Exchange listing. So I think the App Exchange can really, again, kind of help flesh out the picture of the firm and can help shed some additional light. And then finally, and this is something I've actually recently gotten to do myself, is I created for one of the clients I'm working with. We are at the process, or the point of the process of doing a partner selection, and so I needed to be able to research potential firms to serve them. So between Watt's List and the App Exchange, I identified about 30 firms, and then I created a spreadsheet, pulled some data from Watt's List and the App Exchange so I could look at these firms side by side, and then did some sorting to say, okay, we know one important criteria that we're looking for is that the organization has nonprofit cloud consultant certifications on their team. So now let's, among these 30 firms, let's look at, let's kind of rank them in order. And for the firms that were in the top third, based on that certification metric, I highlighted those in green, in the middle third in yellow, in the bottom third in red. And I did that essentially with all the different data points. So at the end, we were able to get that list of 30 down to a list of about 8. From there, did a quick outreach to say to these firms, this organization is about to go through a request for information process. Here's at a high level what they're thinking about doing. Would you be interested in participating? And then out of that, I heard back from, I think, 8 of the 9 firms, they were interested. And so from there, we were able to then engage them in the RFI process to do some additional diligence. This is going to now give the organization a chance to actually talk and meet with each of the firms. We'll get to review written responses to questions that the organization is asking of the firm. And, from there, again, narrow it down to 2 or 3 for some final evaluation and proposals. It is a time-consuming process. In the case of this organization, the assessment itself was about 3 months to get them to clarity about moving forward with Salesforce. And then this partner selection process will be probably about 4 months when it's all said and done. But, they're going to be spending, multiple 6 figures on a Salesforce implementation. And so it's really, I feel like it's justified to make sure that they are making the best possible use of the organization's dollars and choosing the right firm to guide them through this.
You mentioned a few criteria on the App Exchange, like the search, the project, the navigator. I would also add the tier, the partner tier, base, ridge, crest, and summit. That's another way you can help identify a good partner or a partner that has a lot of experience with similar projects.
That's right. Yes, because that score is kind of a roll-up of a number of different metrics that Salesforce uses to evaluate their partners. So yeah, I think that's also a great criteria to check. I also like to look at, how long has the company been in business? It doesn't necessarily mean, more years equals better qualification, but it is just another data point to evaluate, the maturity of the firms that you might be selecting from among.
You mentioned earlier that the Watt's List will be free for nonprofits. What about for firms and consulting, independent consultants? At that moment, I know it's free, but is there a plan to start having a paid version of this or paid tiers within the list?
Yeah. So prior to launch, for firms who joined prior to launch, the annual fee was waived. Now that it's live, there is a cost of $99. So it's kind of an annual listing fee. That is primarily a way to provide a little bit of a gate to it. For any consulting firm, $99 is not an expensive cost, but if I think it is a way to just hopefully attract firms that are actually serious about serving the sector and not just looking for kind of a way to spam their name out to all the possible sources of Salesforce work. It does also help offset some of the cost for operating Watt's List, but it's more about ensuring that the firms that are joining are quite serious in their intention to serve the nonprofit sector. And so that's in place now. So any firm that wanted, or independent consultant that wanted a listing would simply go to wattslist.info, follow the link to create a consulting profile. There is a multi-question form that needs to be filled out. that ask firms all the questions that then are exposed through the various filters on the site, and then firms can pay that registration fee when they submit the form. It takes a few days for me to just go in and do a basic validation to be sure the information looks good, to make sure that I can see some external evidence either through LinkedIn or their website or the App Exchange that this is a firm that truly does do Salesforce work for nonprofits. And then their profile will go live on the site and be discoverable by any folks using the site at that point.
Do you have any future plans on having more tiers, or do you plan just to keep it at $99 a year? Or I know that fee might increase over time, but the idea is having one fee versus multiple fees as a type of advertising, so that firms and consultants can get their name in front of more eyeballs and as search results appear.
Yeah, that's a question I've really considered very seriously. And the place I came to in launching the directory is that I wanted it to be as equitable as possible, and I wanted firms to shine based on their qualifications and experience, and not just based on their ability to have a marketing budget. Because I think in general, if you're in the absence of something like Watt's List, the firms you are likely to encounter out in the market as you were to do a Salesforce partner search would be the firms with the bigger budgets, right? Whether you're doing a Google search, or you're going to an event, or you're dealing with Salesforce itself, right? And they're recommending partners. These are typically the ones who are larger and have more ability to spend to get their name out in front of potential customers. So to me, I really wanted to launch this with the ability for it to be a more level playing field. I may change that over time, or might find other things that I can do to help highlight certain firms, and would be open to doing some sort of more paid promotion. But right now there's no ability for firms to buy their way to a higher ranking on the list. It's strictly based upon the keywords in your profile and how you match up against the filters that are applied. And so, yeah, I do have a backlog that I'm now maintaining. Folks have made some various suggestions. I've had ISVs come to me and ask if there are ways to get their products more visible through Watt's List. I've had consulting firms say, "Hey, we're a B Corp. We would love for that to be able to be more highlighted in our listing." I had a nonprofit ask me about some way to facilitate referrals through Watt's List. So if you see a listing and you want to get connected with a customer who has used that company before, would there be some way to kind of facilitate that? So I love that people are bringing me ideas. I've got a spreadsheet where I'm tracking all of them. At this point in time, I'm going to kind of let it sit for the first 3 months as is, before I make any decisions about kind of where I go with it next. But it is very exciting to think about, and for folks who are listening to this who are maybe going to check out Watt's List, I'd love to hear from you. There's a contact us link on the page. So if you have ideas, ways you think this could be enhanced or made more useful, either to nonprofits or to consultants, I would very much appreciate that.
I'll send you my notes after this recording.
Awesome. I hope so.
But what I also appreciate, especially at the beginning, as you were announcing this, as you were launching it, in the messaging that you were sending out to at least myself, you were saying that this is not going to be perfect in the first version. There are going to be a couple of mistakes. There might be a bit of redundancy, and don't worry, we'll get through that kind of thing. And I really respect that kind of messaging, because you saw the need, you jumped on the need, and that it was more important than trying to launch the perfect product, right? The expression of done is better than perfect really applies here. And you're living proof of that, getting it out there and then improving it over time, getting that feedback. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And also thanks for being in Watt's List. I take that as some vote of confidence that you're willing to list your consulting business there, and hope it's as useful to you as it is to anyone.
Well, listen, Watt, thank you so much for sharing, for creating the list and for sharing the news about it. So you mentioned the links a couple of times. We'll definitely have those in the show notes. Are there any other plugs or any other ways that people can reach you online?
So watthamlettconsulting.com. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, Watt Hamlett. So I hope folks will connect with me there. And again, let me know if I can be of service to your organization, or if you have thoughts or feedback you'd like to share about these resources.
Watt, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.